Officer Emily Harris had always been a woman of integrity, her reputation spotless within the police department. She was respected by her colleagues for her tenacity, sharp instincts, and her ability to stay calm under pressure. But it was the bond she shared with her German Shepherd, Rex, that made her truly unique. Together, they were an unstoppable duo, winning awards for bravery and bringing criminals to justice. However, all of that changed one fateful evening when Emily found herself caught up in a scandal she couldn't have imagined in her worst nightmares. It all started when Emily and Rex were assigned to investigate a string of robberies linked to organized crime. They had uncovered a trail that led them deep into the city's underworld. But as they got closer to the truth, things began to spiral out of control. One night, Emily was called to a meeting with several high-ranking officers who were supposed to have intel on the operation. What she didn't know was that those officers were deeply embedded with the criminals she was investigating. The meeting, which was supposed to be a routine briefing, turned into a trap. A gunfight erupted as officers loyal to the criminals stormed the building, and Emily was caught in the crossfire. In the chaos, she was forced to make a snap decision, one that would haunt her for the rest of her life. Fearing for her own safety, she fired her weapon in self-defense. Unfortunately, one of the officers who had been part of the conspiracy was killed in the crossfire. Although Emily's actions were entirely justified in the heat of the moment, the story quickly turned against her. A few days later, media outlets were flooded with stories about how Emily had gone rogue. The officer's death was blamed on her, and soon the police department itself was under investigation for corruption. Evidence surfaced, fake evidence, it would later be revealed, that suggested Emily had been part of the very criminal syndicate she had been trying to expose. The public backlash was swift and unforgiving. The media had already labeled her as a dirty cop, and even her closest colleagues began to doubt her. Her reputation, built over years of hard work and sacrifice, was shattered in an instant. Emily's every move was scrutinized, and every part of her life was examined under a microscope. Despite her protests of innocence, the evidence seemed overwhelming. The day of the trial came, and Emily stood in front of a judge who had already made up his mind. The courtroom was packed with people eager to see the fall of one of their once heroic officers. Emily's defense was ignored, the documents supporting her claims dismissed as irrelevant. In a final, crushing blow, she was sentenced to death. As she was led out of the courtroom, handcuffed and broken, Emily couldn't help but think of Rex. Her loyal partner, the one being who had always been there for her, would now be left behind. How could she survive this? How could she clear her name? But deep down, she knew that her journey wasn't over. Not yet. As the days dragged on, the reality of her situation settled in. Emily sat in her small, sterile prison cell, the weight of her death sentence pressing down on her like a heavy stone. The once vibrant world she had known as a police officer seemed like a distant memory now. She had been betrayed, framed, and condemned for something she didn't do. The anger and frustration that simmered inside her were almost unbearable, but she had no way to fight back, at least not yet. In the solitude of her cell, Emily's only comfort was Rex. Her German Shepherd had been with her through thick and thin, a loyal companion she had trained and loved as if he were family. Rex had always been more than just a working dog. He was her partner, her protector, and the one being who had never turned his back on her. Even now, despite the chaos around them, he remained her sole source of solace. Rex had been sent to a local animal shelter after Emily's arrest, but the shelter staff, who had known her well, had insisted on allowing Rex to visit her. Each visit, Rex would sit at her feet, his eyes filled with understanding, as though he knew exactly how much his presence meant to her. It was during these visits that Emily began to notice something strange. Rex wasn't behaving like he normally did. He had always been calm and focused, even in the most intense situations. But now, during their visits, he began to act restlessly, growling softly at invisible things, pacing the length of her cell, and occasionally barking at the walls. The other inmates noticed his strange behavior too. Some of them whispered to Emily that her dog was acting like he was trying to communicate something. But what could it be? One night, as Emily lay on her cot, staring at the ceiling, Rex did something that sent a shiver down her spine. Without warning, he jumped up, his body tense, and dashed to the far corner of the cell. He began sniffing and pawing at the floor, digging as though there was something buried beneath the surface. His growls grew louder, and his eyes seemed to lock on something she couldn't see. "Rex, what's wrong?" Emily whispered, sitting up, her heart racing. She reached out, calling his name, but he didn't seem to hear her. He was fixated on the spot, as if something in that corner held the key to unlocking a mystery. The sound of footsteps echoed down the hallway outside her cell, signaling the arrival of the prison guards for their routine check. Emily knew that if she didn't calm Rex down, they would grow suspicious. "Easy, boy," she murmured softly, reaching out to pat his head. But Rex continued to paw at the same spot, his teeth bared and his body rigid with purpose. Suddenly, Emily realized something. The strange behavior, the sudden urgency. Rex wasn't just reacting to something in his environment. He was trying to tell her something. But what? Before she could fully process her thoughts, the guard's footsteps grew closer, and Rex, sensing the shift, sat down quietly at her side, looking up at her with his intense, knowing eyes. Emily's mind raced. Had Rex found something important? Was he trying to lead her to an answer? As the guards approached, she forced herself to push away the lingering questions. But deep down, she knew something was about to happen, a change in the course of her fate, and it had everything to do with Rex. The next morning, Emily received a cryptic message from her lawyer. "Prepare yourself," it said. "Something big is coming." The cryptic message left Emily in a state of confusion. Prepare yourself. Something big is coming. What could that possibly mean? The message was vague, and she had no way of knowing who had sent it or how it was related to her case. But as the days passed, Emily's mind kept returning to Rex and his unusual behavior. Could it be that he had somehow uncovered something important? Or was it simply the stress of her situation playing tricks on her? Rex's strange actions continued, though. Each visit to the prison seemed to increase his restlessness, and the intensity of his behavior only grew more pronounced. It was as if he knew something that Emily couldn't see, something that was just beyond her reach. She couldn't shake the feeling that Rex was trying to tell her something, but the puzzle remained unsolved. Then one afternoon, as Emily was sitting in her cell, lost in thought, she received another unexpected message. This time, it came through the prison's communication system. The speaker crackled, and the voice on the other end was distorted, but she could make out a few key words. It was a phone call, but not from her lawyer, family, or any known contact. "Emily," the voice began, "I know you don't know who I am, but I've been following your case. You've been framed. The truth will come to light. Stay strong. We'll get you out of there." The line went dead before Emily could respond. She was left staring at the wall, her pulse quickening with a mixture of confusion and hope. Was this a prank? Who would know about her case? Who was behind this? She sat in silence, the weight of the call sinking in. How could someone be so certain of her innocence when even her own defense team had their doubts? Was it possible that there were people out there, people she didn't know, working to clear her name? As the hours passed, Emily tried to shake off the growing sense of urgency. She had no proof that the call was legitimate, but something inside her urged her not to dismiss it. After all, this was the same part of her that had always trusted Rex's instincts. And if the dog had uncovered something in her cell, maybe this was all part of a bigger plan, one she couldn't yet see. The more Emily thought about the message, the more it felt like a signal that something was happening beyond the prison walls. She had no idea who was behind it, but the idea that someone was working to expose the truth gave her a sliver of hope. In that moment, she knew that she couldn't give up. Someone was fighting for her, and that was a glimmer of light in the darkness. As Emily sat there, she began to hear a familiar sound in the distance, the soft padding of paws against the concrete. Rex was being brought in for his next visit. His presence, once a comfort, now felt more like a reminder of the bond they shared, one that had yet to be broken. Perhaps, just perhaps, this was the beginning of the end of her nightmare. The guards opened the door, and Rex trotted in, his eyes scanning the room with his usual sharp focus. Emily's heart swelled as she looked at him. Rex had always been by her side, even when the world seemed to have turned its back on her. But now she couldn't help but wonder if he was the key to unlocking everything. The tension in the air seemed to thicken as Emily watched Rex trot into her cell. His eyes, as sharp and perceptive as ever, scanned the room before his gaze settled on her. His movements were purposeful, his stance uncharacteristically tense, and Emily's heart skipped a beat. There was no mistaking it. Rex was on high alert. She sat up from her cot and reached out for him. "Hey, boy," she murmured softly, her voice trembling slightly. Rex came to her, but instead of curling up beside her as he usually did, he began pacing back and forth around the cell, sniffing the floor and the corners as if searching for something. His tail was still, and there was an unusual intensity in his eyes, as though he was on the brink of uncovering something important. The guards who had brought him into the cell stood in the doorway, watching the scene with mild curiosity. One of them, a young officer named Collins, chuckled. "What's the matter with your dog, Harris? He's acting like he's looking for a bone." But Emily didn't laugh. She could sense that Rex was picking up on something that she couldn't see. "Rex," she whispered, trying to call him back to her. But Rex ignored her, his focus unwavering. He was fixated on a small, hidden corner of the room, his nose pressed to the floor as he pawed at it with increasing urgency. It wasn't long before the other guard, a more experienced officer named Jenkins, became impatient. "All right, that's enough," he grunted, stepping forward to grab Rex by the collar. "If this mutt is going to make a mess, let's get him out of here." Emily's heart raced. She knew this wasn't just normal behavior from Rex. Something was happening. Desperation flooded her thoughts. If Rex could find something, anything, that could help her, this could be the break she needed. She stood quickly, moving toward the guards. "Wait, please, let him be. He's just acting strange today. Let him work." The guards exchanged an unsure glance, but Collins shrugged. "All right, fine. Just don't get him too worked up." He stepped back and Emily, grateful for the brief moment of leniency, turned her attention back to Rex. Rex's paws continued to dig at the floor, and then, suddenly, he stopped. There was a sharp metallic sound as something beneath the concrete shifted. Rex let out a low growl and stood still, his head tilted, ears perked. Emily's breath caught in her throat. She dropped to her knees, reaching for the spot where Rex had been pawing. With shaking hands, she brushed away the dust and grime that had accumulated over time, revealing a small, nearly imperceptible crack in the concrete floor. Her pulse quickened as she realized what this meant. Something had been hidden here, something important. She quickly ran her fingers along the crack, trying to widen it. The guards, seeing her sudden urgency, began to approach, but Emily barely registered their movements. With a final tug, she managed to lift a small metal plate that had been carefully concealed beneath the floor. Inside, there was a small folded package wrapped in a cloth. Emily's hands trembled as she reached for the package. The guards noticed her actions, but they didn't move to stop her. "What is that?" Jenkins asked, his voice betraying curiosity. Before Emily could respond, she carefully unwrapped the cloth, revealing a set of documents, papers that seemed ancient, yellow with age. The first sheet was a ledger of some kind, filled with names and dates. Her heart raced as she recognized a few familiar names, officials from the police department, people she had once trusted. The next pages contained detailed records of money transfers, coded messages, and a list of officers involved in a covert operation. It was a smoking gun. This wasn't just a package. It was the key to uncovering the corruption that had framed her. Emily's eyes widened in disbelief. How had this been hidden here? And more importantly, how had Rex known exactly where to find it? She quickly hid the package beneath her shirt, keeping her cool as the guards closed in. But she knew, deep in her gut, that this was it. This was her chance. She wasn't going down without a fight. Rex had led her to the truth, and now nothing could stand in their way. As the guards began to ask questions, Emily's mind raced. The pieces were falling into place. This wasn't just her fight anymore. It was about exposing the truth, no matter what the cost. Rex had saved her, and now it was her turn to do the same for him. The battle had just begun. Emily's heart raced as she carefully hid the package against her chest, her mind spinning with 1,000 questions. The documents in her hands were more than just a lifeline. They were the proof she needed to clear her name. But there was no time to analyze them now. The guards were growing suspicious, and the last thing Emily needed was to draw attention to what she had just uncovered. "What's going on in here, Harris?" Jenkins asked, his voice low but sharp. "What's with the sudden urgency?" Emily straightened up, trying to regain control of her emotions. She forced herself to keep her voice calm, even though her mind was on fire. "Nothing. Just a moment of panic. Rex is just being a little more restless today, that's all." The guard glanced at Rex, who had now settled down beside Emily, though his eyes still held an alertness that was hard to ignore. Jenkins gave a curt nod. "All right, but don't let him cause trouble. We're keeping an eye on you." Emily nodded, forcing herself to breathe deeply. As the guards finally left, the door clanged shut behind them, and she exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. With the immediate danger past, she couldn't wait any longer. Her hands trembling, she opened the package fully, her eyes scanning the contents in disbelief. The documents were a treasure trove of information that connected the dots between some of the highest-ranking officers in the department and the criminal syndicate Emily had been investigating. There were names, dates, coded messages, and financial transactions that outlined the bribes and illicit activities she had unwittingly stumbled upon. Some of the names were shocking, familiar faces from her past, colleagues she had trusted, people she had worked alongside every day. But what struck Emily most was the ledger, a detailed list of people who had been paid off to frame her for the officer's death. The officers involved had manipulated evidence and planted false testimonies, ensuring that she would be accused and convicted. The conspiracy ran deep, and Emily was just a small part of a much larger operation. Her breath caught in her throat as she realized the magnitude of what she was holding. This wasn't just a case of betrayal. It was an orchestrated plan to bring down an entire network of good officers, a network of corruption that had spread like a disease throughout the department. But with the documents in her hands, Emily now had the power to expose everything. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. She knew that with this evidence, she could bring those responsible to justice. It would be a long and dangerous road, but at least she had a fighting chance now. But there was something else, something even more important. The message she had received earlier, the cryptic phone call, suddenly made sense. "We'll get you out of there." Emily didn't know who had sent that message, but now, more than ever, she believed there was an underground network working to expose the truth. She wasn't alone in this fight. The pieces were falling into place, and it felt like she was on the brink of something monumental. Emily knew she couldn't keep this information to herself for long. Her lawyer had to see these documents immediately, but the prison's communication system was too risky. She would have to find another way. Her thoughts were interrupted by a soft bark from Rex. She turned to look at him, and the bond between them was stronger than ever. Rex had led her to this moment, to the truth that had been buried. They were a team, and together, they would see this through. She stood up and tucked the package safely beneath her shirt. There was no turning back now. The fight for her freedom and for justice was just beginning. "You said." Emily's pulse raced as she clutched the package against her chest, the weight of it a constant reminder of the dangerous path she had just stepped onto. With the documents in her possession, there was no time to waste. She needed to get the information out of the prison, but how? The guards, the system, and even her own self felt like walls closing in on her with each passing moment. If she was caught with these documents, her death sentence would no longer be a concern. It would be an absolute certainty. Rex's ears perked up as he sensed her growing anxiety. His gaze never left her, and for a moment, Emily felt the comfort of his presence, the silent assurance that he would never abandon her, no matter what came next. He had already saved her once by finding the hidden documents. Now, it was her turn to outsmart the system. She paced back and forth in her cell, weighing her options. The prison was heavily monitored. Every move she made was watched. Every word she spoke listened to. But Emily knew the system wasn't flawless. There were cracks, small windows of opportunity where she might be able to slip through unnoticed. The question was, how could she exploit those weaknesses without drawing suspicion? Her mind turned to the prison's routine. Each day, there was a period of time when the guards conducted their rounds and the prisoners were given their brief moments of freedom in the courtyard. It wasn't much, but it was a chance to move around without direct oversight. Emily knew that if she timed it right, she could use that window to her advantage. But the real obstacle was getting the documents to the outside world. She couldn't risk mailing them. She'd be caught. That left only one option: finding someone on the inside who could be trusted to get the evidence to her lawyer. She thought of her lawyer, Derek Hayes, a man who had always believed in her. He had fought for her from the beginning, despite the overwhelming evidence stacked against her. If she could somehow reach him, he could help expose the corruption. But how? A sudden thought hit her. There was one person who had been visiting her regularly, her former partner, Officer Carter. He was a good man, one who had worked closely with her during the investigation. If anyone could be trusted to help her, it was Carter. But Emily hadn't spoken to him since the trial, and now she wasn't even sure where his loyalties lay. The corruption ran deep, and Carter could very well be compromised. Still, Emily couldn't afford to waste time. She needed a plan, and she needed it fast. She turned to Rex, whose quiet gaze seemed to offer the unspoken answer. "We'll find a way." She could almost hear it in her mind, his silent reassurance. The next time the guards came to check on her, Emily pretended to be exhausted and unresponsive, laying flat on her cot as if surrendering to the overwhelming pressure. The guards, seeing no immediate reason to be concerned, glanced at her indifferently and moved on to the next cell. When they were out of earshot, Emily quietly rose, her movements slow but deliberate. She whispered to Rex, "It's time, boy. Let's go." With one last glance around the room to ensure she wasn't being watched, Emily slid the documents from under her shirt and carefully placed them in a small folded cloth she kept in her drawer. She stepped up to the cell door, peering through the bars to ensure the hallway was empty. The guards were still making their rounds in the far distance. Emily's heart hammered in her chest. This was it, the moment of truth. She turned to Rex, who stood by her side, his eyes steady. "Stay close, Rex," she whispered, as quietly as possible. "And don't let anyone stop us." With a deep breath, Emily slid the small cloth into her pocket, and with Rex leading the way, she stepped out into the corridor, keeping to the shadows. It was now or never. The cold, sterile hallways of the prison stretched out before Emily like a labyrinth, each step forward a dangerous gamble. Her heart pounded in her chest, each beat echoing louder in her ears as she moved swiftly and quietly. Rex, ever the vigilant companion, walked beside her, his body tense, ears alert for any sound that might signal danger. His presence was both a comfort and a constant reminder that this was far from over. They were still deep inside enemy territory. Emily had never felt so exposed. Every corner, every shadow seemed to hide a potential threat. She knew that if anyone saw her, or worse, heard her, she would be caught before she could even make it to the courtyard, let alone escape with the evidence. Her eyes scanned the hallway, the sound of her own breath sharp and rhythmic in the silence. "Stay quiet, boy," Emily whispered to Rex as they passed the guard's post. The two guards inside were focused on their conversation, oblivious to the fact that Emily and Rex had slipped past unnoticed. The guards' chatter about an upcoming shift change provided the perfect cover, and Emily moved quickly, hoping the distraction would last long enough for her to get to the courtyard. She couldn't afford to make any mistakes. As they approached the final stretch of the hallway leading to the prison yard, Emily's nerves were stretched to their breaking point. A brief flicker of doubt crossed her mind. What if Carter didn't show up? What if no one outside even knew where she was? But the thought was fleeting. She had come this far, and turning back wasn't an option. Too much was at stake, not just for her, but for everything she had worked for. The truth had to come out. Rex suddenly stopped dead in his tracks, his ears perked. Emily froze, her heart skipping a beat. Was it a guard? Another prisoner? She held her breath, listening closely. Footsteps echoed in the distance, but they weren't approaching from the direction they were headed. A guard was walking the opposite way, heading toward the hallway where they'd just come from. The timing was dangerously close. Emily crouched low to the ground, pulling Rex to the side with her. They pressed against the wall, remaining as still as possible. The footsteps grew louder, and for a long, agonizing moment, it felt like time itself had slowed. Emily's breath was shallow as she tried to remain calm, but every part of her screamed for her to move. Finally, the guard turned the corner, his footsteps fading into the distance. Emily exhaled, silently thanking whatever luck had allowed them to remain undetected. "That was too close," she muttered under her breath. With the path ahead now clear, she motioned to Rex. "Let's go, boy," she whispered. The courtyard was just ahead, and with each step, the outside world felt closer, like the end of a long tunnel. They made their way to the prison yard gates, which were usually unlocked during the brief outdoor breaks for the prisoners. Emily's heart pounded in her chest as she reached for the gate. The sound of her own breathing felt deafening as she tried the latch. The gate creaked slightly as it opened, but Emily and Rex slipped through without a sound. The courtyard was deserted. No other prisoners were in sight. Emily could see the high, barbed wire fence that separated the yard from the outside world, and for the first time in what felt like forever, she could almost taste freedom. But this wasn't the final hurdle. There was still the matter of getting the documents to someone who could help her. Then in the distance, she spotted him. Officer Carter. He was standing near the exit gate, his back to the wall, eyes scanning the area nervously. Emily's heart leaped. Carter was her last hope. He had always been a reliable partner, but now, in the face of such overwhelming corruption, Emily didn't know if he could still be trusted. Rex, sensing the change, stood by her side, his posture ready, waiting for the signal. Emily took a steadying breath. There was no turning back now. She took a few tentative steps toward Carter, her mind racing, and then she called out in a voice only loud enough for him to hear. "Carter, it's me. I need your help." Carter's head snapped up at the sound of Emily's voice, his eyes scanning the yard until they locked onto her figure. For a moment, everything seemed to stand still. The tension in the air was thick, almost suffocating. Emily's heart raced as she watched him, unsure of what to expect. Carter had always been someone she trusted, someone who had been by her side through thick and thin. But now, given the stakes, she couldn't shake the nagging feeling that everything could fall apart in an instant. Rex stood still at her side, his fur slightly bristling, sensing the tension between them. Emily took another step forward, her voice barely above a whisper. "Carter, I need you to take something. It's important. I need you to get this to my lawyer." Carter didn't move for a moment. He seemed frozen, as if weighing his options. The seconds stretched into what felt like hours. His gaze flicked between Emily and the package she was holding, and Emily could see the internal struggle playing out on his face. "You don't know what you're asking," Carter finally said, his voice low and careful, as though trying to protect something, or perhaps himself. His eyes darted to the horizon, as if looking for anyone who might be watching. "There are eyes everywhere, Emily. I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can help you." Emily's stomach dropped. This wasn't the response she had expected. She had come so far, fought so hard, and now it seemed like Carter was wavering. Was he compromised? The thought gnawed at her insides. She took a step closer to him, her voice firm but desperate. "Carter, please. I know what you're thinking, but this is the truth. You've seen it too. The corruption runs deep. You know, it's not just me, right? These people, they've done this to others too. I just want to expose the truth. Don't let them win." Carter's eyes softened for a brief moment, but the uncertainty never left. "Emily, you don't know what you're up against. They'll come for you, come for both of us, if you push this any further." His voice cracked slightly. I want to help you, I do. But this is bigger than both of us. It's a war, and I'm stuck in the middle of it." Emily's heart clenched. Was this the end of everything? Had Carter already been bought? Suddenly, a sharp sound shattered the tension between them. A radio crackling from a guard tower in the distance. Carter's face drained of color, and he took a cautious step backward. We don't have much time, he hissed. I can't do this. Not here. Not like this. Emily's mind raced. She had come so far, had nearly made it, and now this. She couldn't let this opportunity slip away. The documents, everything, had to get to the right hands. Without Carter's help, she was alone. But as she looked at him one last time, she saw it in his eyes, the hesitation, the guilt. He hadn't fully turned against her. There was still a chance, still a way to reach him. Rex's growl broke the silence, and Emily instinctively reached down to calm him. Please, she whispered, her voice steady despite the panic threatening to overwhelm her. You have to make a choice. Help me or don't. But know this. If you leave me now, I'll never stop fighting. Even if it means I have to expose you to get the truth out. Carter's expression faltered. He opened his mouth to say something, but the words died in his throat. Just then, the unmistakable sound of footsteps, several pairs, echoed across the yard. The guard patrols were getting closer. Without another word, Carter gave a quick nod, his eyes filled with resolve and something else. Fear. Give it to me, he muttered, extending his hand. Emily quickly passed him the small bundle of documents, her heart in her throat. She watched as he tucked it into his jacket, nodding once more. I'll get this to your lawyer. I promise. Before Emily could thank him, Carter was already moving toward the exit gate, disappearing into the shadows as quickly as he appeared. Emily stood still, her mind racing as she processed what had just happened. She had placed her trust in Carter, and he hadn't betrayed her. For now, she had done everything she could. But the fight was far from over. The documents were safe for the moment, but the real battle had just begun. Now, all that was left was to wait and hope.